For over 10,000 years, Sauron was a problem for the peoples of Middle-earth, as both Morgoth's servant and as a Dark Lord in his own right. Yet despite his best efforts, Sauron had never succeeded in conquering all of Middle-earth, being stopped multiple times by the Elves and the Númenóreans and their descendants. Finally, it seemed like his persistence was about to pay off. The host of the West was surrounded before the Black Gate, their destruction imminent. But in the moment of what should have been his triumph, Sauron realized he had been tricked, and that it was actually his own destruction that was imminent. In this video, we talk about Sauron's final moments. On the 25th of March 3019, Sauron had every reason to be confident. Across Middle-earth, his armies had suffered major setbacks, but he could afford a war of attrition, whereas his enemies could not. And speaking of his enemies, they were making an incredibly bold move. 7,000 soldiers, led by the heir of Isildur, were marching on the Black Gate. If there was nothing else at play, Sauron would have regarded this as a completely insane move. 7,000 men were no threat to Mordor, but for Gondor and Rohan, 7,000 men were a significant chunk of their surviving armies. Instead of holding up in their fortresses to make Sauron pay, they were marching out to be obliterated. But there was something else at play: the One Ring. Sauron had come to the conclusion that the heir of Isildur, Aragorn, was the person who possessed the One Ring. It was a perfect explanation for recent events. It explained why Aragorn so brazenly revealed himself to Sauron using the Palantir, and it explained why Aragorn was able to score a major victory at the Battle of Pelennor Fields, despite the odds being heavily against him. It also explained why he was marching on the Black Gate like an utter fool. The One Ring can give someone delusions of grandeur, and having fallen for them, Aragorn was now marching on the Black Gate because he genuinely believed he could win. Sauron is all too eager to let Aragorn march on the Black Gate. The only resistance he offered was a poorly disguised ambush by orcs and the Easterlings in Ithilien. When Aragorn arrives at the Black Gate, Sauron even makes a show of offering to negotiate, and when Aragorn rejects the unacceptable terms, Sauron springs his trap. Not only does the Black Gate open for the armies of Mordor, but there's also an army of Easterlings hidden just to the east of the Black Gate. Together, they surround the host of the West on two slag hills just outside the Black Gate. Aragorn and his men are trapped, and importantly, the One Ring is too. Although the host of the West has the advantage of terrain, they're outnumbered by over 10 to 1, they have no realistic chance of victory. In this moment, Sauron would have been elated. You have to remember that even though the odds were heavily in Sauron's favour when the war began, to the point of where a conventional military victory was basically impossible for the Free Peoples, he was still full of doubt. He had been burned before, so he was taking every single threat seriously. He actually launches his attack on Middle-earth prematurely because he's concerned about giving Aragorn the time and space to rally the Free Peoples against him. But with the host of the West trapped, and the One Ring within reach, Sauron is aware that there's nothing that can realistically stop him anymore. Once he has the One Ring back, the rest of the war is just going to be a formality. And then, at Mount Doom, Frodo Baggins puts the One Ring on his finger, and Sauron is aware of him. Have you ever had a moment in your life where you screwed up really bad, or maybe even done something really embarrassing? You get this hot flash, your mind races 1,000 miles per hour as you panic, you struggle to say anything, you desperately look for a way out, you get this pit in your stomach. You might have had all of these things happen to you, or maybe just a few, or maybe none because you're a psycho. Well, this is Sauron in that moment. He suddenly realizes that he is the one that has been tricked, and at first he is angry, but then he becomes afraid. Aragorn isn't some deluded fool, he's the carrot dangling from the stick. The halfling that was captured in Cirith Ungol wasn't merely a spy. He was the key to the whole plan, and he's either gotten away or he wasn't alone. You see, Sauron never considered that someone could destroy the One Ring. He can't imagine someone throwing away that kind of power. This is why Mount Doom wasn't guarded. And technically he's correct. Frodo was gotten to the very end and then seemingly failed. But the fact that the One Ring has actually made it that far is a huge deal, and as someone prone to worry, Sauron isn't about to leave things to chance. He is very much aware that his fate now rests on a knife's edge. The reason why his fate is on a knife's edge is because Sauron's existence is tied to the One Ring. When he created it, he poured a large amount of his power into it, assuming that he would never be separated from it. This assumption proved to be false, as Sauron lost the One Ring after his defeat in the War of the Last Alliance. But the One Ring still aided Sauron. While it existed, so did most of his power. This meant that even though Sauron had already died twice, he was able to return, although in a vastly weakened state. However, if the One Ring was to be destroyed, that would mean the vast amount of Sauron's native power would also be destroyed, and what little power Sauron had left would not be enough for him to retain a physical form or rebuild one. The fear that Sauron feels is actually a huge deal, because it has an effect on everything in Mordor, because, in a way, Sauron is Mordor. Everything from his fortress of Barad-dûr to his orc foot soldiers are held together by his will, and if his will fails, then Barad-dûr crumbles and that orc flees because he has nothing left to drive him onwards. So when Sauron panics, everything in Mordor panics too. Barad-dûr trembles from foundation to crown, his soldiers stop, waver, and then begin to despair. Because in this moment, Sauron has forgotten about everything except what is going on inside Mount Doom. The only thing he can do is direct the Nazgul towards the mountain, in a hope that they will get there before anything bad happens. And for Sauron, the worst thing that could happen, happens. Gollum reclaims the One Ring, slips, and falls into the fire, taking his precious with him. The instant that golden ring dissolves in the fire, Sauron's physical form would have been destroyed. Whatever power he had regathered dissipated. He went from a Dark Lord to nothing more than a malevolent shadow, aware, really angry, but ultimately harmless. His final act was to reach towards the host of the West in his giant shadowy form, but he's so weak that the mere wind can blow him away. I think what makes it even worse for Sauron is that when he dies, he doesn't just go from conscious to unconscious. He dies and is fully aware of what has happened. He gets to fester in his anger forever, that he had been tricked and then destroyed thanks to the tenacity of a pair of mere halflings. As a fun bonus, he also gets to watch all of his creations turn to dust. Like I said earlier, Mordor was basically held together by Sauron's will, like a magical undercurrent. When Sauron's will wavered, his armies faltered and the Tower of Barad-dûr shook. But when that will was gone entirely and the power of the One Ring destroyed, those armies shattered and Barad-dûr collapsed, probably unable to sustain its own weight. Either as a direct result of Barad-dûr's collapse or as a side effect of Sauron's destruction, Mount Doom proceeded to erupt, and Mordor was rent asunder by massive earthquakes. These were so powerful that the Towers of Teeth collapsed and the Black Gate was ruined. Beyond that, Sauron would watch his dominion disintegrate and his former subjects carve out their own destiny without him. Denied the ability to go into the West and too weak to reform, Sauron would remain as nothing more than a malevolent shadow. He wouldn't be able to meaningfully interact with the world beyond perhaps incoherent whispers whenever his name is mentioned. The new shadow shows us that Sauron worship might have remained or restarted at some points, but this wouldn't help him because it's not like it could bring him back. We're also told that the new shadow cult would end up failing, and this would probably be the case in many other places. Eventually, his name would start meaning nothing to people, little more than an ancient legend or monster, and then, eventually, it would be forgotten. If I had to put it into more relative terms, imagine a guy in his house who was watching the lottery. He's so confident that he's put his life savings on it, and to be fair, he has every single number that has been called out. It gets to the final number and he has it, and he's so happy this is life-changing. But then he rereads it just to be sure, and then he realizes that no, not only does he have the wrong number, but the correct number is also a number that he didn't even realize existed. I'm not sure how that would work. Oh, and then he drops dead, so does his family, and the entire house randomly collapses. And the neighbors are out in the street celebrating because no one liked him, and he gets to watch all of this as an angry ghost. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it or at least found it interesting. If you've never read it, or just haven't read it in a while, I will always recommend reading the passage where Frodo succumbs to the One Ring. Sauron's reaction is so brilliantly written. It's like he goes through the 4 stages of grief in mere seconds. I say 4 and not 5 because I doubt Sauron ever experienced acceptance. Cheers, farewell, and remember, if there's a takeaway from this video, it's don't gamble. You and everything you have might randomly be destroyed.